and welcome back to Dark Matter Podcast. I'm Dominique.
And I'm Avalon.
So, we haven't done a pop culture episode in a while, so today our topic is K-pop, and this is something I've really been looking forward to talking about because K-pop has really just blown up the past couple years, and even if you're not a K-pop fan, I still think you'll find this episode really interesting because we're really going to dive deeper into K-pop and talk about issues within the idol culture as well as the society in Korea. And Avalon, you and I really love talking about like new cultures in different countries, so I think this topic is extremely relevant for the both of us.
Yeah, for sure. And I never really knew much about K-pop or was never really a fan myself, but I've definitely come to have an appreciation for it because of you, because you just taught me so much about it and the culture and music behind it. And yeah, I honestly do love learning about different cultures and countries. We both do. So I think this is just it just makes sense for us.
Right, yeah. So first I want to give a little background about what we know about K-pop, like what our relationship with it is. So I started listening to K-pop about 2 years ago because one of my college roommates loved it, and now I'm a fan of several different groups, but I certainly don't claim to know every single group that's out there. There are plenty of them. Avalon, do you want to share your knowledge of K-pop?
Yeah, so like I said before, I really didn't know much about it before, and I still don't know too much about it now. I feel like I have a baseline, a knowledge, but I don't know a lot about it now. And really everything I've learned has been from you for the most part, you and a few of my other friends that enjoy Korean pop. And yeah, so I never really listened to the music that much myself. I know a few songs by Blackpink or BTS, but I don't avidly listen to it, but I really do enjoy the music videos and just their aesthetic in general. I just think it's really cool, and I don't know, I really enjoy them. And I think that K-pop idols are very talented and amazing performers. And I think it's cool that they've become such an international thing because I don't think there's too many countries or the music from too many countries that is as popular as K-pop has become in the US. So I just think it shows how special K-pop is and just what a sensation is that it's blown up like this even over here in the West.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think K-pop is great because it's really allowed for people all over the world to see a bit of Korean culture and experience new music. And it's also very different from what we've seen from, Western artists. I think K-pop just has such a high production value and amazing artistry, and people are really drawn to that. Okay, so before we start anything else, we also just want to put a disclaimer out there. This is not in any way meant to bash any K-pop artists, and nor are we saying that any group is better than the other. Alright, so first let's talk about the rise of K-pop. So modern Korean pop music really started in the late 90s, and it's culminated into what's known as the Korean culture wave, or the Hallyu. And the first two idol groups that really pioneered this wave was Seo Taiji and the Boys and HOT. And after HOT became a huge success, their label company SM Entertainment formed the all-female group SES in 1997. In 2000, they debuted a solo artist, BoA, and these and other artists such as Shinhwa, Zexki's Turbo, God, Fly to the Sky, Rain, and Lee Hyori made up what is known as the first generation. And the second generation, which started around 2003, is when K-pop really started to spread and take off, not just in Korea, but all throughout Asia and other countries as well.
Right, and in this second generation, we saw the advent of new iconic groups, so TV, XQ, Wonder Girls, Big Bang, 2, Anyone, and Super Junior, and there's plenty of others. And this leads us to the third generation, which is pretty much where we are currently. And this generation is where K-pop really exploded and got attention from the Western audiences, like we were mentioning earlier. They've just blown up all over the world. And of course, these are the groups that if you know anything about K-pop, you probably are familiar with these. So BTS, EXO, Blackpink, GOT7, Red Velvet, and there's plenty of others, and the list just keeps getting longer. Yeah, and we've really seen K-pop take off in the US in the past couple years especially with BTS, and other groups like Blackpink and Monsta X. And something I've noticed is that they've even started, I've been seeing more and more collabs with K-pop groups and American musicians, which I never saw that before. So that just shows they're becoming a part of our pop culture now that they collab with the musicians here.
Yeah, definitely. Like, who is it? BTS has collabed with Steve Aoki a couple times. They also collabed with Halsey. So yeah, like you said, like it's really become part of our culture as well, which I think is really great because I love incorporating other people's cultures as well and learning, new things from them. But let's get into, how to kind of become an idol. So, in case you didn't know, an idol is just what they basically call a Korean artist, and I think this word is very fitting because there is such a rigorous and competitive process to become an idol that it can take years to do this. But before that, let's actually talk about the background behind these companies. So, the entertainment companies themselves in South Korea, there's what's known as the Big Three, and that includes SM Entertainment, JYP, and YG. So these three big companies are the ones who've really had the most success, and they have successful groups and solo artists and are known for being just really big powerhouses. But of course, the company Big Hit has also risen in the industry with their massive success with BTS. And these companies are kind of like idol factories. They train, produce, manage, and control these idols' entire careers. So, first, a person is either scouted on the streets or they have to go through a company's auditions. And once you pass that initial phase, you then assign a contract to become a trainee under that company, which we'll talk about later. And while you're a trainee, you're given lessons on how to dance, sing, rap, and how to act in public. And some trainees, too, are even from other countries. They have global auditions from all over the world, so they have to move to Korea and start to learn the Korean language. And they also learn other languages as well, like English, Chinese, Japanese. There's actually several foreign members. NCT is a huge unit right now, and they have several members. There's 10 from Thailand, Lucas from Hong Kong, and there's Yuta from Japan. So like I said, there's just a huge bunch of different backgrounds coming in there as well. So they usually select trainees who are fairly young because it can take years of training before a trainee is deemed ready to debut. For instance, Suho, a member of the group EXO, trained for 7 years before he was able to debut.
That's insane. I think it's crazy because for us, like, I remember when you first told me about this, I was like, what the hell? Because that is just so different than like what we know of as like kind of the career path to become a musician in America. Like a lot of
Right, it's
times like
very
you'll hear
different.
people who are huge now that are just like, I don't know, I was living in my car and then somebody just met me and they're like, "Hey, you look cool." You know what I mean? Like you
Hmm.
just it's like more of like an individual thing. Like it's not this like rigorous. I mean, of course there's a lot of like rigor that goes into it and like there's a process, but it seems like so cut and dry in Korea, like in the South Korean culture where it's like this is the process you take to become a musician, and it's just like very cutthroat. It was so mind-boggling for me when I first learned that like it was like that. It really is
Right, yeah.
like a factory, like you said earlier. They just like pump out these musicians. It's crazy.
Hmm.
Right, and as you mentioned before, it is very competitive, as you can imagine. So they undergo rigorous training and they have frequent tests to see if they've improved their skills. And many don't even make it past the training stage, which again is crazy to me that they have like tests to see if they're like it's. I mean, it's a job. It is a job, and like of course, if you're a musician, like that's your job. But this is like it takes it to another level. Like it seems like I guess the weird part, or like the part that's hard for me to understand, is that like it seems that the creativity is somewhat taken out of it and the emphasis is more put on like are you meeting the quotas, are you making the numbers, are
Right.
you know what I mean? And like it I see that like I mean they're incredibly talented, so it kind of weeds out the people who like wouldn't be like ready for this lifestyle, but it's just
Yeah.
crazy to me. And as you mentioned, some of them are younger, so a lot of them are in school also, so they have to balance schoolwork with this insane lifestyle. And so I can't imagine how much stress that must be for the younger ones. And
Right, yeah.
trainees, they also have to follow a strict diet in order to keep up their like idol image. And so many of them record their weight and body fat percentage, which leads many to become underweight. And I just, when I found that out, I was like, that is literally just encouraging eating disorders. That's
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
toxic to like keep track of your weight and everything like that, like so like to a T. And again, like I don't think that's like unique just to the K-pop industry, but that it is really sad.
Right, yeah, and like also like we have to remember like they do a bunch of rigorous physical activities. They're singing and dancing all at the same time for several hours, if they're doing live performances. So I can't imagine that this is helping that either, if they're not getting sufficient nutrients, then how can their bodies perform accurately?
Yeah, that definitely worries me that they become underweight because I mean, like, you shouldn't be underweight. Like, you should, whether it's because of the stress or what you're saying, like, they're out there performing for hours at a time or they have to have this, like, crazy diet, you
Hmm.
shouldn't be underweight, you know what I mean? And so, like, that's like a, I mean, like, at the end of the day, like, we might, like, glamorize being underweight, but it's not a good thing. That's a health problem, you know? And so it
Right.
definitely takes a toll on their health, on their mental health, and literally their physical health as well. And
Hmm.
once they actually do debut and become idols, their schedules are insane, as you can imagine, and they're just like packed to the point where they're just exhausted all the time, which again leads to health problems because you have to get sleep in, you have to get enough nutrition. Like these are just like basic things that are kind of being taken away from them. And aside from singing and dance rehearsals, going to photo shoots and recording albums, they have a lot of other things to do to promote themselves, to obviously like get their name out there and to make it as an idol. So they have other duties like like appearing in variety shows, doing commercials, brand endorsements. So it really leaves them with no time for rest because I think it's easy for us to see celebrities on shows or like yeah like doing a brand endorsement or whatever it might be and just not
Hmm.
really think anything of it because it's like yeah that's just a part of the job. But like if you think about it, like they're on tour, they're making the actual music, they're training for tour and for the music, and then they're doing all of that stuff on top of it. Like it's a lot, it's so much, it really takes a toll on someone, especially when they're a young adult.
Yeah, I mean, these people, like, they really work hard. Like, they work hard for it because they've been fighting for it for years. Like, they've put in a lot of effort. So it really shows. And like we mentioned before, the trainees first sign a contract when they start with a company, but what we didn't mention is that the contract also extends into their idolhood. And the K pop industry is pretty infamous for their slave contracts, which is accurate because idols are practically signing their lives away to this company. SM Entertainment, in particular, is well known for its mistreatments of its artists, and they have had several lawsuits brought against them from their idols. In 2009, 3 out of 5 members of the popular group TVXQ filed a lawsuit against SM and terminated their contract with the company. Also in 2009, former Super Junior member Han Gong filed another lawsuit, which, according to an article from Hello K-pop, claimed that his 13-year-long contract with SME was unlawful, and like TVXQ, the profits made from Super Junior's successful albums and singles were not fairly distributed among the members.
I don't know how contracts usually work, but to me, 13 years is so insane. That is so long to me.
Yeah.
Because, like, let's say he was starting out as a 20-year-old, which he might not have even been 20 at this time, but let's say he was 20. That
Mm-hmm.
would mean he would be in with them until he was 33. Like, think about how much happens in that. Like, you're gonna get married, you have kids, like, possibly, like, so many things could change, and, like, they're gonna keep him in for 13 years. It's literally like slave labor. Like,
Yeah.
that's insane.
I know, like, the contracts do last a very long time. I think average is maybe around like 7 or 10 years. So they are beholden to these contracts for quite a while. And something that I did mention before too is that, like while these trainees are getting trained under this company, the company is bearing the costs for all this training, the makeups, vocal coaches, stuff like that. But sometimes if a trainee pulls out, they're then forced to pay for all that themselves.
Oh my God, I didn't know that. That's insane. Well, then of course
Yeah.
the pressure to stay is high because I'm sure they use like top-notch stuff so that it's
Hmm.
incredibly expensive if you leave. Like that's awful. That must be so much pressure.
Yeah, so like I said, like it already isn't a great situation. They're already at a disadvantage. And one of the biggest controversies that SM Entertainment really had lately was starting in 2014, 3 out of 4 of the Chinese members of EXO filed lawsuits to terminate their contract with SM, and they claimed that it was over unfair treatment compared to the Korean members, which I just want to point out like that was not the others member faults at all because at the end of the day, they're in the same situations and they don't have much power. But basically, they claim that because they were Chinese, they were treated unfairly, especially compared to the Korean members. You know, they had more beneficial treatment.
That sucks. I mean, that goes without saying, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
that. It's crazy because like there's already been so many things that like it's like mind-boggling how bad they're treated, and it's like, oh wow, they're racist on
Right.
top of that. Like they treat them differently based on where they're from. Like that really sucks.
Right. And I feel like we're just really touching on the tip of the iceberg here. Like the culture of like the idols. It's a whole thing really. It's a huge societal thing. It's really become part of their culture.
Yeah. All right, well, next, let's get into basically like the idea of the idol image. So, they're expected to portray themselves a certain way, obviously. And aside from singing and dancing lessons, idols get trained on how to act during interviews and how to market themselves to become more popular, which definitely could feel artificial if you're being trained
Mm,
on
definitely.
how to. It's like you're acting even when you're not acting. You know what I mean? Like it goes beyond just how to sing and dance. Like it's also like just how to compose yourself. And again, I want to say like this isn't like too different than a lot of celebrities here. Like they, everyone has like a publicist that they have to like make sure they're not acting crazy, so they still get brand deals or
Hmm.
whatever it might be. But I think it's just like with K-pop, I feel like it's just another level. Like everything is just another level of like you have to act a certain way, you have to look a certain way. Like it's just really intense. um
Yeah, it really is.
yeah, and there's just like a very, very high standard that these idols have to live up to. And not only do they have to be talented, they have to be beautiful, they have to be funny and entertaining, but they also have to be humble and relatable so that a young person can be like, can feel related to them, and they can feel like there's someone that they would want to hang out with. And that's kind of just like too much to ask for, to be like funny, amazing, beautiful, everything good, and also super humble. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like that's the thing. I feel like they almost build them up to be like perfect. So I feel like again, like that's holding up to such a high standard. It's like you're presenting yourself. You're supposed to be all these things, and it feels like so many people are watching you all the time. So I can't even imagine the burden that they have to deal with. You know, like obviously they did sign up for this, but at the end of the day, like they are human beings, and it doesn't matter. Like this is just their job. They still deserve respect. You know, so like building them up to be these like perfect, the ideal like people is obviously not going to end well because no one is perfect. Everyone is always going to make mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. I think that it's inherently flawed to like build it into the system that they're just perfect and they're everything anyone could ever be, like every good thing a person could be. Because then when they make a mistake, this facade comes crashing down, and people get pissed off, as we're going to get into later. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
people should have been aware in the first place. I know a lot of them are young, but like people should have take things with a grain of salt and remember that even for just the average celebrity, their life is not what it seems to be. Especially though
Right.
with K-pop stars, where they're literally cultivating like a life that doesn't really exist.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I think that that's something
Right.
to definitely keep in mind, bear in mind with all celebrities, but especially K-pop stars. I would say that like their life is probably not what you think it is, and
Right.
they have to put on a happy face probably a lot of the times.
Right. And like that's not to say that they're being fake. Like
Yeah,
we're that's not what we're saying at all. Like I just feel like they definitely have to be on guard and they always have to watch what they say, you know?
of
Because
course.
again, they are like most of the Korean population is watching them, like listening to what they say, and they're held or they're seen as like someone to look up to, you know? So that whole thing just makes it so much harder.
Yeah, and I think that it's definitely not them. I think it's definitely the companies, like you said, like because I mean, if you're held in a freaking 13-year contract, you know what I mean? Like you don't really have much say in that. And like you said,
Mhm.
if you're gonna have to pay all this money afterwards if you leave, then of course they're just gonna stay. And so like I really don't fault them. I really do fault the companies that they sign up with for like and like we mentioned earlier, a lot of times they're super young when they get started. Like they're a teenager. Of course they're just gonna of course you want to be famous and rich when you're a teenager. You know what I mean? You're not really thinking about all the pros and cons of it. So I really don't fault the idols themselves for the most part. Like I really fault the companies that that are making this culture so pervasive. Um,
Right.
and yeah, I think that all of this, cultivating like a image is really to make them more desirable and make them more popular, which of course will give them more fans and more money. And basically, what this ends up doing is objectifying them because they're not even
Mm-hmm.
kind of like we said, like they're not living a real life, or like they're not them particularly, but they're told to portray this life that doesn't really exist. So they're
Mm-hmm. So they're not really in control.
yeah, they're not really in control, and they're just seen as like objects that people feel like they can like they can contain, and they own, they have some kind of possession of. And it's, we'll get
Right.
into that, it's really toxic how some of the fans like see the relationship to the groups, and this can lead to some of the, like I said, like the most toxic things about K-pop and idol culture, which is the scandals, which most of the time aren't even scandals.
Right. So most of these like quote unquote scandals is usually when an idol is found to be dating someone else. And like we mentioned, like fans become incredible, some fans can become incredibly upset because they feel like they own them, and they feel like, oh, well, now that they're dating someone else, like I don't love them for that, and which is just crazy to me. And it gets to the point where they actually throw hate at the idol, and they'll send messages for their company to remove them from the group, which is absolutely insane to me. And an example of this is when it was actually announced that EXO member Baekhyun was dating Wonder Girls member Taeyeon, and both idols received so much hate that Baekhyun was even seen crying on stage, and both of them had to give a public apology for disappointing fans. And more recently, in 2018, Triple H members Edon and Hyuna revealed that they had been dating for 2 years, and because of that announcement, they were both cut from their company, Cube Entertainment. Which is so crazy because, again, it's like this is their personal choice. This is their personal life. Why should who they're dating affect their careers in this way?
Yeah, so I think that's so wild. This is another thing that, like, when you told me about it, I was so shocked that fans like legit get like
Yeah.
butthurt, like to the point where they like say that people should be removed from the group, like basically like they've
Mm-hmm.
turned their back on them just for dating someone. Like that is so not normal. Like you have to realize like that is just so like not like okay. Like I don't understand that because I think a lot of celebrities here like I feel like we're
Exactly.
obsessed with the
Yeah.
couples. You know what I mean? Like it's almost the opposite. Like we're so happy for them, and like I'm sure there's really toxic people. I
Right.
mean, there are
Right.
really toxic people here, of course, that might be mad about it. But I feel like if you like if I met someone who was genuinely mad that like the person they like, their like musician they like is dating someone, they would
Yeah.
be seen as a freak. You know what I mean? It would be like what? Like why are you mad at them? They're a person too. They're living their own life. Like why would you be mad that like like Bella Hadid and Zayn are
Gigi
dating or
Hadid.
something like that. I'm like, why would you be mad about
It's
that?
Gigi.
Oh, is it Gigi? Yeah, I don't keep up with these things, okay? But you know what I mean? Like, why would you be mad about that? That's
Right.
like
Yeah.
not a thing here, I feel, or it's not as common. So when you told me that that's like a
Mm-hmm.
widespread thing that like they literally try to get people removed from the groups because of it, and the fact that people actually
Right.
have been
Yeah.
removed from groups because of it is just such a shame because it's like they basically like damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because if you keep your relationship private, then
Mm-hmm.
at some point it's gonna come out. And then if you just choose not to have a relationship, I mean, like that sucks. You should be able to date who you want or just date,
Yeah.
period. You know what I mean? Like that's they shouldn't have to live a life of celibacy just so they can like sell records. Like
Yeah,
that
I
is
know.
insane
Like
to me.
it is crazy because like we said, they are people and they do deserve lives. Like, and that is really the result of the idol culture. Like we can see how some extreme fans feel like they have some sort of right to their idol, and it basically ruins their fantasy if their idol is dating someone else, which in turn the it lowers their marketability. It's seen as they're not seen as appealing anymore because they're not available. And I feel like the other thing too is that Korea is a very perfectionist country, and I feel like, and by that I mean that people are very much pushed to achieve for most of their entire lives, And now that these idols are touted to the public as, like being ideal as someone to look up to, one small mistake can really end the career that they worked years for. And as you can imagine, that puts them under an insane amount of pressure. And I think this is so toxic because it's great to be a fan of an artist and appreciate their music, but at the end of the day, fans don't have the right to their lives. They are entertainers and public figures, yes, but that doesn't mean that idols don't deserve to date or have a family. And I also feel like you can't really call yourself a fan if you can be so quick to turn on them and to throw hate at them, like you said. Like, you just completely turned your back on them. Like, how can you say that you are a fan if you can do that? And yeah, I would not call them fans at all.
Yeah, that's not what a fan does, because usually a fan is like yeah, maybe they might be like a little obsessed, or they might be like really into a musician
Hmm.
or celebrity or whatever, but like they really, like fans tend to want the best for the celebrity. Like there tends to be a reason that they
Hmm.
like the celebrity, and they want to see them happy. Like I can't imagine that a fan would want to see the person that they're so, the person of their affection miserable and not be able to be in a happy relationship. Like I just don't understand that. Like don't
Right.
call yourself a
And
fan
so
then.
now let's talk about like those kinds of different fans, because I just want to start off by saying that majority of fans seem to just genuinely love and support these artists, which is amazing, you know. But there's always a flip side to everything, and of course I'm referring to Saesang fans and Koreaboos.
Right, and so for those of you who don't know, which I didn't know either, a sasaeng is a person who exhibits dangerous and obsessive stalker-like actions towards an idol or towards idols, like several of them, which is kind of like, I guess it's kind of the equivalent of a stan, like a
Yeah.
stalker fan. If you guys are familiar with the song by Eminem, Stan, it's kind of like that, like psycho fan. And some of the things they do are, they're just insane. So they'll try to follow their cars or sneak into their hotel rooms, which when people do stuff like that, I always wonder,
I
I'm like,
don't know.
what's your end game here? Like, were you trying to kill them? Like, what were you trying to, like, because let's say you do sneak into the room, they're gonna call security on you and the cops and get you out of there immediately. Like, you've already violated so much by doing that. Like, they're gonna want nothing to do with you. So, like, do you think that's gonna make them fall in
Right.
love with you? Or, like, are you just, like, deluded like that? Or did you want to scare them? Like, what was really, like, your end goal here? Like, what did you see happening for you? Like,
I know,
I don't
because
understand it at
I
all.
mean, I just don't see any positive outcome from doing anything like that. Like, if you just really take a second to think about it, you just ask yourself, will this end well? And the answer is no.
Yeah, it's always no, but at the same time, we just would never
Right.
do something like that. Like the majority of people would never do something like that, so we probably can never
Right, yeah.
understand why they do that. Yeah, but some of their actions have definitely caused like actual physical harm to some of the idols. And a Super Junior member, Heechul, was actually running away from a Seising stalking him, which caused him to get into a car accident, and he actually ended up breaking his leg from this. So it's really no joke. Like these fans are out of control. Like some of them, the fringe,
Right,
obviously.
and so now we're going to talk about Koreaboos. And according to Urban Dictionary, a Koreaboo is someone who is obsessed with Korean culture so much that they denounce their own culture and call themselves Korean. And one guy who is very well known for being a Koreaboo is this guy named Ollie London. And if you haven't heard of him, he's pretty infamous for spending thousands of dollars on plastic surgeries on his face to look like BTS member Jimin, and so, you know, basically to look more Korean. And spoiler alert, he does not look like Jimin.
Right. I think this is just like the most extreme version of like cultural
Mm.
appropriation, because they literally, like you said, they literally denounce their own culture and then just claim to be Korean. And like I understand, I really do understand relating to and like appreciating and having love for a
Oh,
different culture,
absolutely, yeah.
like having one specifically. Like for me, I like love Chinese culture. I grew up around it and it means a lot to me, but I'm not out here about to call myself
Right.
Chinese. Like even when I took Mandarin, I'm not like, hey guys, like I'm Chinese now. Like that's just not how it works. You don't just get to like say that you're a different culture. And then especially the fact that like this guy specifically, like he had all these surgeries to look like one of the members. It's just, I think that he definitely, like I don't want to attack him because he definitely has some things going on, but it just like to me it's just not a good look to like, I mean, it's like the old saying, like you can't be anyone else, like everyone else is taken, just be
Mm-hmm.
yourself, you know what I mean? And it just like that can't be said enough. Like you can't impose yourself into another culture. It's okay to appreciate them and to love another culture and know a lot about it, but you can't just claim the culture for your own. Like that's not how it
Absolutely. And I
works.
think, like, I really want to explain, like, obviously, there are people who truly appreciate and love the culture, and that's one separate thing completely. You know, like, it's totally fine to want to explore a different culture, but these people. it's not in a genuine way. Like I feel like they're almost jumping into the hype of it. Like they're not in for it for the music or the culture. It's kind of like they see the hype and they're trying to jump on the train for that. And actually, regarding that, there was recently a bit of backlash when it was announced that the debut of UK's first K-pop group, Kachi, and there was a lot of drama over this. And I think, like, I'm not going to say anything about the girls or give them hate. Like, I don't think anyone should ever have to deal with like the internet slamming them. So I'm not going to give them any hate, but I just think the reason why people were so against him was the fact that, like I said, the when you go to Korea, you have to go through all these steps to become an idol, and they had a really short training period. Like it lasted for a couple months, and like I said, they kind of bypass um the whole entire process, and that feels really unfair to the Korean trainees who spent so much time and energy trying to go through that. And not only that, like they don't actually even speak Korean. There's like I like to call her like the token Asian because I feel like she was added very last minute actually, and they had two different members before her. So there's four girls, and the three were first introduced, and then their fourth member kept switching, and they just added this girl last minute, this Korean girl, and I feel like they were just like, okay, we're gonna toss in an Asian girl in here, and we're gonna call ourselves a K-pop group. And maybe that wasn't their intention, but that's kind of how it comes off. It seems a bit insincere to me, and I feel like the thing overall too is that it's just not up to par with the standard K-pop groups. If you're gonna claim yourself as a K-pop group, then you are competing with other K-pop groups. You have to compete with their singing, their dancing. You have to compete with the production of their MVs. They're very high production, like we mentioned before. They're very artistic. So if you're claiming to be a K-pop group, you then have to compare yourself to others, and when they are compared to others, they are just lacking. Like, I'm sorry to say, but like I said, they were not trained long enough, and like I said, like, I'm not gonna say anything about who can or can't be a K-pop idol. That's not my thing to say. I'm not a Korean. I have no stake in this. But I just will say, if it's like K-pop was kind of created for normally minority group to kind of shine and show their talent. So I feel like coming from a predominantly like white country like the UK is kind of just, like, why do you have to call yourselves a K-pop group? Like, why not just a pop group?
Yeah, and so okay, my question here is like, so of the four, three of them are white.
Three of them are
correct?
white, and like I said, only the fourth girl is Korean, but she was added very last minute. They had two members before her that they had switched out, and some people are actually claiming that one of the members is a Korea boo. Like I said, I don't know anything about her, so I'm not gonna say anything about her, but that's what people have claimed, and I think they claimed that because she had her name was Ruth, and some idols take a stage name, which is very common. But the thing is, she's white, she has a white name, but she chose the name Chunsu, which is Korean. So I guess I can see what people are saying. Like I said, it's a very fine line. I feel like that's why people are against this mostly because it feels insincere, and I kind of have to agree with them. It kind of toes the line for me, and I just don't see them as true K-pop.
Yeah, no, I think this is absolutely insincere because I think that, like you touched on earlier, the whole idea of K-pop is like the reason I was always like so like I thought K-pop was so cool and it was like encouraging to see it blow up so much to me was that this is like another
Mm-hmm.
culture and like you mentioned this earlier as well that like we're finally getting to see a little bit more of like Southern Korean culture because of K-pop, you know what I mean? And now we like know a little bit more about South Korea because of the influence of K-pop, and it's just so that's just so UK to come along
Yeah.
and like you know what I mean to like take this thing and then make it about you now or like you know what I mean like I could see that happening in America too honestly, but like it's just crazy they came along and they like saw the sensation of it, they saw the success of K-pop groups and they decided they were a part of that, and it's like you're not a part of that. There's so many appropriate ways that they could have
Right.
gone
Yeah.
about this, like you always hear musicians saying where they get their inspiration and sometimes it's random places. they could have just like been a normal group and said like, oh yeah, we're really inspired
Absolutely,
by
yeah.
K-pop. We really like take hints from them and take, with our aesthetic and with our songs. And I really don't think that would
Hmm.
have been a problem. But to call yourself a K-pop group, it's just like inherently you're
Right,
not,
yeah.
though. You know what I mean? Like that's the glaring problem, is that like if you're a group from the UK, you're not a K-pop group unless, I mean, like maybe if they were all like Korean citizens that moved to the UK and wanted to form a group in the UK, I don't think
Hmm.
there's anything wrong with that. But just like as a group of white girls in the UK to say you're a K-pop group, like that's just so wrong to me. Like that just like is so strange to me that it's like you can't even let Koreans have
I
Korean
know,
pop.
yes.
You know what I mean? Like you have to take that as well. Like just don't call yourself like K-pop, and don't give yourself a name that is not a part of your culture. Like don't try to take their
Yeah,
culture like
and
that.
something I will mention too is that it's not so much about like white girls not being able to be part of Korean culture, because like I said, like if you were like American or whatever, there have been American or English speaking trainees in entertainment companies, and that's totally fine. But the thing is, that's because they went through the process. They flew all the way to Korea, they moved there, they learned the language, they went through the entire process. So I feel like that's kind of just the way to get there, that is the essence of Korean pop. And I feel like if you're just not going to do that, then you can't claim it.
Yeah, literally. Like it's just like if me living in America now would just like claim Chinese heritage and start like,
Hmm.
you know what I mean, like change my name. Like that's not how it works. And like, yeah, that's a good point that like I have a friend who's white and she loves K-pop. She spent time in Korea and like she speaks Korean pretty well. And she's not at all a Korean, but like it's not
Yeah.
weird at all. Like she just has love for the culture. She loves the groups and like it's not weird. It's just like a part of
Hmm.
her
Yeah.
personality. But like once you get to that place where you're like, oh, I'm Korean. It's like, no, you're not. Like, don't like try to like just don't take that from them. You know what I mean? So like, I just find that so crazy that a group really wants to call themselves
Yeah.
K-pop. It's just funny. Okay, so next we wanted to jump into kind of a darker aspect of it. First, we want to talk about mental health just in general in
Hmm.
South Korea, like how the state of mental health is there, and then get into some of the idol suicides that unfortunately came about probably because of this culture. I mean, K-pop culture, but at
Right.
large,
Yes.
Korean culture as well. So, as probably a lot of you know, mental health doesn't get the attention it does. At least it's starting to get
Hmm.
here in America, in some other places in the world. And this is especially true in collectivist nations. So, if you didn't already know, so America is considered an individualistic nation, and that is that like what that means is our culture tends to value like self-reliance, independence, and we put an emphasis on the self rather than the community. It's really about like you can achieve your dreams, you can do whatever you want and just like go out and do it rather than like what's best for
Right, it's what's
everyone.
best for you, which we've definitely seen lately, but that's another topic for later.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, that's definitely I think we've seen that time and time again in
Hmm.
America that a lot of times we tend to put ourselves before the group, which is unfortunate. And I'll say this again later, but I think that there's amazing aspects of individualistic and collectivist cultures, and
Definitely,
I'm
yeah.
not saying one is better than the other, they're just different. But in collectivist cultures, our nations, the community is definitely valued higher, much higher than the individual. Like the idea of like the squeaky wheel gets the grease, or that idea in America that it's like just complain or like make a problem, like get your problem fixed, and like never stop trying for yourself. That is like not a thing in collectivist cultures because you really worry about the
Hmm.
community and the nation, the family before you worry about yourself. And everyone is considered when you make a decision rather than just you. And working towards harmony is very important, and like just resolving things so you're all working together harmoniously is much more important than here, where we're just kind of like, okay, well, screw you, you don't like it, I'm doing it my own way, and that's seen as a good thing, and it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing, but just emphasizing that it's different in Korea because Korea is considered like a collectivist culture. And I think, like I said earlier, there's wonderful aspects of both of the cultures, and I think there's something for us to learn from each other. But I honestly, I feel like you and I tend to be more collectivist
Hmm.
minded than individualistic. Like we definitely think about the whole like before ourselves. But that being said, there are definitely toxic parts of collectivist cultures, and they might like they tend to make an environment where mental health isn't really
Hmm.
prioritized. Because I mean, if you think about it, your specific mental health, like you as a person, that's not really crucial to the well-being of the entire community or the well-being of the entire nation. It's not really about you, right? So I think there kind of tends to be this de-emphasis, I guess you could say, placed on mental health, because it's like, well, you don't matter as much as the community, but at the end of the day, you do
Right,
matter. You know what
yes.
I mean? So it's just a different way of seeing
Absolutely,
things.
yeah. So that definitely does have a part in it, but also I think you know, obviously not just idols struggle with mental health, many people do in Korea. But I think it's definitely escalated for idols for all the reasons that we stated above, you know, like such an insane amount of pressure, like societal pressure. They've just been having to deal with so much at a very young age, you know. And so as we said in South Korea, as with most Asian nations, it's considered a collectivist nation. And just for some numbers, South Korea is actually number 10 in the world for number of suicides. And suicide is the number 4 most common cause of death in South Korea, compared to the US, which is number 4 for 30, or number 34 for suicides, and it is the number 10th most common here. Again, the US has many issues of its own, and we can definitely learn many valuable lessons from Korean culture and other cultures as well. This is not to say one is better than the other, it's just a comparison to see, you know, what the differences are in suicide numbers and mental health.
Right, and unfortunately, South Korea has even been given the nickname of the Suicide Nation. And just an example of why that is that in 2016, roughly 3,500 people in their 60s and 70s committed suicide, which places the elderly suicide rate of South Korea twice that of the general population and three times the average elderly suicide rate. And this is, like we said before, like this is no surprise that because it's already an issue in South Korea, it's even more of an issue with idols who are under, like we said, insane amounts of pressure, insane amounts of stress. They aren't able to live their life necessarily as they'd like to, and they have eyes on them all the time, just like, you know, walking eggshells so they don't mess up. So it's unfortunately not a big surprise that suicide is such a problem with idols. I even read one article from The Guardian where the journalist was reflecting on how they reported on 30 Korean celebrity suicides. That's one journalist that said, like, they were looking back at like their career of reporting. They said, like, I've reported on 30 Korean celebrity suicides, and it wasn't like a whole lifetime either. It you know what I mean? Like, I don't remember how many years it was over, but like it wasn't that long. And like that's just so sad that it's almost like so it's like so common. Like it's almost like we're desensitized to hearing about
Mm-hmm.
K-pop stars or just in general Korean celebrities that killed themselves because it's just such a common
Yeah,
thing.
and one event that actually rocked the whole nation of Korea, and I feel like that really helped spread the word, was an event that happened on December 18th, 2017. And tragically, K pop fans all over the world mourned the death of SHINee member Jonghyun, who had committed suicide. And the 24-year-old idol was found in his apartment after being called by his sister, who was concerned after receiving text from her brother that said, quote, please let me go, tell me I did well. And Jung Hyun was rushed to a nearby hospital, but was unfortunately pronounced dead later that evening. And SHINee was a very popular band. Like I said, they were part of like the second wave. They really helped bring more attention, and you know he had many fans all over the world who loved him, who were devastated by his passing. But you know, he was very open about his struggle too with mental health, and he wrote about it in his music. So you know, like there were signs, like he did call out for help, but again in Korea, they don't really have the resources that we do. I think therapy is kind of looked down upon, like therapists aren't really a thing, whereas here it's becoming more common, becoming less taboo, which is absolutely good. It should definitely be destigmatized because everyone deals with mental health issues, you know. So but yeah, again, compared to Korea, like he didn't have a lot of resources to go to, and unfortunately, he ended up taking his own life.
Right, and there was another one I read about. This one was in 2019, similar to that one. They were so young; it's just so devastating. In this situation, it was the K-pop idol Sully who committed suicide, and her best friend, who was also a K-pop star, Guhara. she went on IG Live or Instagram Live to say goodbye to her best friend, and she was just sobbing. Obviously, this is like literally it was her best friend that she was
Mm-hmm.
mourning the loss of. And she made a point to let her followers and fans know that she was going to be okay. And she said she went as far to say that she was going to live twice as diligently now that her friend was gone. But unfortunately, neither of those things were true because she was actually found dead herself less than 2 months later. And these women were 27 and 28 when they took their lives 2 months apart. And this one just really broke my heart because this kind of made me think about the fact that so many of these idols take their lives, and it's like you don't think about it, but like they have friends in the industry,
Yeah,
of course. You know
absolutely.
what I mean? Like a lot of them are either dating each other or friends with each other. Because I mean, if you think about it, like they're kind of the only people on the planet that know exactly what they're
Yeah.
going through. Because like other celebrities might get it, but like we've mentioned, K-pop is like another level. So I feel like if I was in that situation, I would probably have a lot of like I would want to have a lot of support from other K-pop members because they know exactly
Mm-hmm.
what I'm going through. And to lose those friends, you know what I mean? That just like to lose that support system of people who truly understand you. I can't imagine what that's like for all the people who have, all the K-pop idols who have lost friends and coworkers in K-pop. And both of all the stories I've heard about these are just tragic because they're
Mm-hmm.
so young and they're so successful and they have so much going for them. And it's just sad to think that, kind of like you said, like even being that successful and that famous, it wasn't enough to provide them with what they needed as far as mental health goes because because partially because of the culture and partially because of their work has put a culture around them that shames you for looking for help and shames you for being vulnerable and saying, I'm not feeling good, like I'm not happy, because it's like, well, maybe I think sometimes it's like your happiness isn't as important as the whole group's happiness. And so yeah, I think it's really disappointing to see these, but I think it's at least the good part is that like more attention is being
Yeah.
brought to it, but it is very
Absolutely, yeah.
tragic.
I feel like if there is any silver lining to this, I hope that it really does. It definitely has opened up more conversations about mental health, and I feel like we are able to see the pressure that these idols are put upon from a very young age, and that's really why we want to cover this topic because it is absolutely great that K-pop is spreading, but of course, like these idols are struggling themselves. The industry is very tough, and hopefully being able to talk about all these issues will make it better. The music is amazing, their talent is amazing, and the only thing that's really lacking is how they're treated because at the end of the day, these people have worked so hard to get here, but they, again, at the end of the day, they're all still human. They deserve respect and privacy and their lives, just like anyone else. So yeah, we really hope you enjoyed this episode. That is it for this week. We'll be back next week with another episode. You guys want to reach out to us on social media, we'd love to hear feedback from you guys and maybe episode requests. If you can reach out to us on Instagram at Dark Matter Pod and our Twitter Dark Matter underscore pod and our Facebook page Dark Matter Podcast. And if you guys want to check out any pictures or details from this week's episode, check out our website darkmatterpod.com.
Right, and if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, be sure to leave a review and follow us. You can also listen to us on Spotify or YouTube, where we post our episodes every week. And be sure to spread the word if you enjoyed this episode or any of the other episodes, because the best way for us to have more listeners is to get word by mouth. So we really do appreciate you guys letting your friends and family know if you enjoyed our podcast. And that's it for this week, you guys. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, guys. Bye.